Welcome back to Queens of the Damned, a horror podcast. Before we start today, I started a blog. As some of you might know, I'm finishing up my master's in English, and my thesis is going to be on gender in the haunted house narrative. So this originally started as a way for me to keep track of my thoughts on different books I'm considering to write about and other stuff. But I recently got an internship in special collections at a local library, which will give me the opportunity to do a bunch of research on cemeteries in the area this fall. So I thought, why not make this a blog about my interests in Gothic literature, the horror genre, thanatology, cemetery history and photography, folklore, and true crime. If you like Queens of the Damned and wouldn't mind some short nonfiction reads in your life, I think you are going to love this blog. I'm having so much fun with it already. I already have 2 book reviews up and a post on a mausoleum I got to visit in Pisa in 2016 in the works. So if you're interested in it, it's called The Macabre Librarian. Go to macabrelibrarian.wordpress.com and you will find more information about what the blog is about, as well as those 2 book reviews. And it's spelled M-A-C-A-B-R-E librarian.wordpress.com. Also, don't forget about our giveaway. The tech wizards have figured out how to make our Facebook a business page. So this means that you can now leave reviews for the podcast there. And we really appreciate the feedback. It helps us so much. So if you leave one, that also means that you'll be entered into a giveaway for horror movies and memorabilia. We have an amazing episode for you today. Rachel, Miranda, and I were so excited about the new film Hereditary that we switched up our recording schedule to do a roundtable on our experiences of the movie. I won't say much here, but if you haven't seen it yet, now is a good time to switch off the podcast and go see it. Like, what are you doing listening to a podcast on a movie you don't want spoilers for? Enjoy. So for our first question, I noticed that A24 recently tried to figure out how scary this film was by measuring the audience's heart rates during a screening, and some of the participants' BPMs reached 164. So what was your reaction or state of mind while you were watching Hereditary? Hereditary.
I was definitely on my toes and on edge throughout the movie. I don't know that I was necessarily, like, thrown off guard throughout I don't know how to explain it. I wasn't, like, horrified, I think. That could just be because I'm so desensitized at this point. It's kind of hard for me to get there. But I was definitely on edge throughout the movie. And then when they have those really jarring, gruesome scenes throughout it, then it just, I don't know, that would just set me off, put me in a really bad place, I guess. But what about you guys?
I don't know if this movie really scared me, because there's only really one type of movie that generally scares the crap out of me, and this was not that type of movie. However, I did find it to be really freaky. There were times where I definitely felt my heart rate going up. I did jump a few times, and it was kind of upsetting. I mean, obviously a child dies, which is relatively upsetting to me, but then once we find out at the end that, you know, she was possessed by a demon or whatever, I was kind of like, well, then maybe it wasn't so bad. Maybe she kind of deserved it.
Yeah,
Nikki, what'd you think?
I'm completely alone here, I guess, because I got the shit scared out of me, and I don't normally get that scared at movies. There's a couple ones that do scare me, but they don't really stay with me so much afterwards. This one did. There's a few themes that, like, get me, and one is just a, like, untimely, horrible death. Like, in the autopsy of Jane Doe and such, like, some of the stuff that happened, it just hit all the right buttons for me, and I had to put my feet up on the seat for, like, half of the movie. When we left, Paul said, I feel physically exhausted, so I wasn't the only one. But I slept with the lights on for 2 nights after it, and I made Paul sit in the bathroom while I took a shower one night.
Well, if it makes you feel any better, one of the friends that I brought with me cried. She cried a lot.
Did she cry because she was so scared, or?
Yeah. She turned to me a few times and she was like, I don't think I can do this. I was like, you can do it. You're fine.
We're already here.
Yeah.
I think that's fun, though, to get that scared. I mean, I think Paranormal Activity was the last movie that scared me so much that I could not sleep.
Yeah.
So it's kind of fun to be. I mean, it's a different kind of adrenaline rush to be scared that much. I think it's kind of fun.
Part of it was that it took such a left turn at one part that I wasn't expecting because the trailers were misleading, which I loved. And then I felt like I was out of control of my experience. And then I felt weirdly vulnerable because I didn't know what was going to happen. And I loved that so much.
Yeah, that's the best kind of horror movie where it just... Because I feel like... I mean, obviously I love horror movies, but a lot of the time you can see the twist coming.
Right.
Or, this is this type of movie. This is a vampire movie. This is a zombies movie. This is a demonic possession movie. But we didn't know that going in.
Yeah.
Right. And I loved that the twist, not only did you not really see it coming, but it made sense. Once you thought about it, you could see all the signs leading up to it. And because sometimes I feel like in horror movies, they try and jam in a twist because they feel like there should be one, but it doesn't always work. But I felt like this one really worked.
It was very carefully constructed. Every single moment of it. You could tell it was a passion project and it was not just a money-grabbing horror film like certain franchises have become or are.
Well, it's his first movie. Yeah, I feel like we've had a lot of really great first movies from horror directors over the last couple of years.
Yeah.
A24
definitely.
has been just hitting the mark pretty much every time.
So I know I had a really interesting audience experience, but what was it like for you guys first? What was it like sitting in an audience? How did people respond to the movie?
So my audience was definitely really scared. They screamed constantly. To the point that it got to be guys, okay, this is scary, I know, but you're snapping me out of it. It wasn't just screaming. they were shrieking at every jump scare. And it's please just breathe. Take a deep breath. Yeah, my audience was really into it. When we were leaving, we could just hear people being like, oh my god, that was so scary. Oh, I'm gonna have nightmares. There were definitely a couple of people crying.
That's awesome.
So I had a really good audience. I had a really
boring ass audience. There were about, we went to a matinee. No, we didn't. That's a lie. We went at about 7:30, but it was a Wednesday. And there were 10 people in there. And some of them just kind of looked like they wandered in there by accident. And there were no reactions, which left me feeling stupid because I gasped audibly during one part. And you never want to be that person in the theater who's overreacting.
That's the only one.
I was I hate myself right now. Thanks, guys. There's kind of a sweet spot with audience reactions. On opening night, it's cool when everyone gasps and laughs and does stuff like that because those are all there's just something in the air, when you're all waiting for a horror movie. But at the same time, you also don't want nothing. Guys,
right?
Did you just see what I saw?
Right.
Well, and I feel like some of the scenes in this movie were so jarring and so unexpected. That's really surprising to me that there was just no reaction.
And it might be because it was so real in a way. Some of it that.
Yeah.
People it was
just
crickets,
too much.
Which is also a reaction, I suppose. What was yours like, Miranda?
So if any of our listeners follow me on Twitter, they've already heard about this. Because when I left the theater, I was just, fuming. People laughed throughout the whole movie. The theater was packed, and everybody was laughing throughout the movie. There are some scenes with, naked people, and that's what everybody wanted to laugh at throughout the movie. The scene where the mom kind of levitates up to the treehouse. Everybody just burst out laughing at that. Everybody laughed at the ending. Everyone, I think there were a few people that were what the literally just said what the fuck at the end of the movie. It was probably one of the worst experiences I've had watching a horror movie, and they kind of hurt that experience so much because I was really into the movie and I was really enjoying it. And then to have people laughing the whole time around you, it just sucks. It really sucks. And I know all my friends enjoyed it. Everyone who came with me really loved it. And none of them are really that into horror movies. So, I don't know. I felt like that spoke volumes to the kind of people that were around us that night.
Did you think was it all nervous laughter, or was it mostly like, I came here to laugh at this horror movie?
To me, it didn't feel like nervous laughter. Some of it might have been, but it felt more like, you know, the people who come to see horror movies to be like, I sat through that, it was nothing, sort of a thing, you know, to get some kind of like bravado out of it. And it's just, I'm convinced that there is like a special circle of hell for people who pay $10 for a horror movie just so they can laugh through it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I don't get why you would even do that. I don't get it.
It's very strange, and it's very rude to the other people coming to see this movie because they actually want to be scared.
Right.
Like, if you think it's funny, wait for it to be on Netflix and then watch it and be like, oh, it was nothing. But like you said, they paid at least $10 a piece to get in there.
Yep.
At least.
Oh, yeah.
We paid more than $10 to get in.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it was just, it was opening weekend when I went. I don't know if that had something to do with it. But it was bad, and everybody that was walking out was talking shit about it, and it was just a bummer.
Did you say anything about the old lady?
No, I didn't. So, like, at the end of the movie, all of my friends were kind of talking about how much we loved it, and this older woman and her friend came up to us, and she was just like, there was no one else in the theater. We were the only people left. She came up to us, and she was like, wasn't that just the silliest movie you've ever seen? And I got so mad, and I was just like, no, it was actually a fantastic movie. I didn't think anything about it was funny at all. And she was just kind of like, oh, and she just walked away with her head kind of hung, and I was like, yeah, don't try it. Don't try it. I'm so mad right now. Don't come at me, lady.
Oh my god.
But yeah, it was just ridiculous.
That's just such a shame, because I feel like there are some movies where that kind of thing is okay. Mm-hmm. Like, for example, we saw Get Out in the theater, and I was probably one of like 3 white people in the audience. Almost everyone else was, if not African American, then not white. But that was one where they were like the rest of the audience, I mean, I was like laughing at the funny parts, but you know, was laughing at the funny parts and like yelling at the screen, but it made it more fun. I mean, like at the end when Rose, I think her name is, the girlfriend, is like dying in the road and the cop car pulls up and you think he's gonna get arrested or killed, frankly, killed. I mean, the whole audience is going, oh no, come on. And then when it was the friend, like everybody cheered. That made it more fun. That was the kind of movie where laughing and talking back at the screen made it a better experience. Right. This, definitely not. No. Definitely not one of those movies.
Nope. Definitely not. And I don't know, would it be considered art horror?
Oh god, it's very...
I don't know if I want to...
Yeah.
Is it?
A24 is famously an indie kind of art house sort of company.
That might have something to do with it, because it, like, audiences... Okay, I don't want to generalize. I just feel like audiences here in the Quad Cities, whenever I go see art horror, they don't respond well. They, like, hate it.
They don't get it.
Yeah, they just hate it, because they're not getting what they want, usually. I felt like this movie didn't really rely on jump scares that much, and a lot of people want stuff like that. So that might have had something to do with it. Like, I remember when I went and saw The Witch, and the audience did not respond well to that either. Everyone was just mad. So maybe it's just a Quad Cities thing. I have no idea.
Maybe, but it's so funny because I had heard literally nothing negative about this movie. I had not heard anybody not liking it until you told me people in your audience didn't like it.
Yeah, it's weird.
Actually, the critic reaction was really good, weird. But the overall audience reaction was really mediocre online.
Which is so strange to me. I don't... And like Miranda said, maybe it is because it's that more arty horror, and maybe people didn't quite understand what they were getting into. I know that was a complaint with The Witch. I mean, The Witch was advertised kind of badly as this, like, super duper scary, oh my god, you're gonna scream and freak out at this movie. And then that's not what happened.
Right. And Hereditary was marked the scariest movie of 2018. And I don't know, when I see that, I'm always like, okay. Like, it's always just an advertising stunt. And, like, I know when I wanted my friends to see it, they said something like that to me, and I was like, you can't ever believe that. They always say that. So I don't. Maybe it had something to do with that because they really were talking it up a lot, and it wasn't. It wasn't your typical horror movie. It was extremely different. So,
well, a lot of the horror movies that A24 releases are not typical.
Yeah.
I mean, they did It Comes at Night, which I don't know if you guys saw that one.
Not yet. I really want to.
They did A Ghost Story, which is very strange, but very good. They did Killing of a Sacred Deer, which was one of my favorite movies last year. Also scary, also good, but more weird. I guess that's the thing with their horror movies, is they're more unique than, like, outright terrifying. Though, obviously, Hereditary scared a lot of people, because Nikki's not the only person that I've heard who had that same reaction.
Right. Well, we took Catherine to it, and she was not scared. She liked it, but she was not scared either. I was so alone. I was so alone, guys.
That's okay.
I'm okay now, though. I think. I don't know. Can't say I haven't been thinking about it.
Good.
Constantly.
Okay, I do have to say, though, like, sometimes when I'm trying to sleep at night, sometimes some of the, like, really gruesome scenes come into my head, and I'm like, I feel like look around my room when it's pitch black. I'm like, why is this happening right now?
Were you just here?
Oh, God. No!
A couple people have said, speaking of audience stuff, that the audience was making those sounds during the movie.
Yes, that was happening in my audience, too.
Oh, like the clicking?
That was pissing me off, because I couldn't tell if it was happening in the movie or if it was happening in the audience. And that drove me insane.
Yes. I've heard several people say that the audience decided they thought they were hilarious and were doing that.
No, nobody did that at mine.
Good.
But Rachel, can I just have your experience?
Going again. I know.
What the heck?
I know. I know. Well, and we are going again, so I hope that it's not bad.
Yeah.
Because I really want to see it again and enjoy it. But this is definitely one I'm going to buy on DVD, so I can enjoy it for years to come.
Same here.
So this leads pretty well into our next question. What was the scariest part of this movie for you guys? And you can't say the whole movie, Nikki.
Oh no, I have a part picked up. Thanks,
Go ahead.
So I talked a little bit earlier about it taking this left turn. And this was when, obviously, the car accident happened. And when you had thought that Charlie was going to be the main focus of this film, which wasn't a lie, actually, but just in a very different way, I don't know what it was about. That whole sequence was just the most awful thing I've ever seen in my life. And that was the part where I started feeling like I was losing control over what I was experiencing. And, like, I have, this is really, really, really dumb, but I have, like, a mild peanut allergy, so I totally get the beginning of that feeling of, like, it's not so easy to breathe anymore, and, like, having to watch her go through that was excruciating for me, like, and just everything that happened after that, and the way they shot it, and just... Ugh, that was the scariest part for me. Everything after that was scary in a different way.
To me, that scene, that wasn't the scariest scene for me, but that scene was too real for me to handle. Like, it was heart-wrenching. Yes. Every second of it. Like, watching her struggle when she couldn't breathe, and then watching Peter struggle once he realized what happened. I mean, just like to see the look in his eyes, that was an awful scene to sit through.
Yeah, it was so it was so difficult. It was, and I think that's why, because it touched so heavily on reality. It was just damn, like it really puts you in that space of, like, well, I don't want to talk about it too much yet because we're going to get to another question, but really puts you into that space of, like, what real loss feels like. It's not like a funeral in a movie. It can be like that, you know? So.
Yeah, and I mean, I think for me, it would continue on from that same scene. So, wow, we all thought the same thing. But it was not only the scene of her going into the anaphylactic shock and then getting beheaded, but when the mom goes downstairs and finds her decapitated body in the car, and then they cut to her decapitated head on the side of the
Yes.
road.
Oh,
And there's like, what, ants or
Yeah.
something crawling all over it.
Because they bring that back. Everyone starts seeing.
Yeah. And that scene of the mom finding her body was just horrifying. Horrifying. And I feel like Toni Collette really, really, really deserves an Oscar nomination for this movie. I don't know if she's going to get
agree.
it because it's horror, and they just did Get Out, and I feel like they're going to be like, we're set now for the next like decade.
yeah.
We don't have to nominate any more scary movies. But she was phenomenal in
She
this
was.
movie. And that scene, I mean, the whole movie, but that scene alone really just solidified it for me, how great she was. I love her so much, and I've loved her for a long time.
Yeah.
But how great she was. So for me, that was I don't know if that was the scariest part of the movie, but that was definitely the part that I had the most, like, visceral reaction
Yes.
to.
Yeah.
It's that whole sequence.
See, I felt like both of those scenes for me were, like, emotionally very difficult for me to get through. But I felt like the most jarring part of the movie was when the mom was cutting her head off.
Yeah, me too.
Dear Lord.
Me too.
That is what I see at night when I'm trying to sleep.
Yeah.
I was a little
That was-
disappointed
yeah.
by that because I feel like that was a recycled tropey thing they used to fill in like scary stuff at the end, and I was like, this reminds me of the Evil Dead remake when she's sawing her mouth open and
Oh, I don't know. For me, it felt different from that for me, and I think part of it was because it lasted so freaking long.
it did.
Like, I remember
Yes.
sitting there like, it's still going on? Like, it's not over yet?
Yes.
My god, like, it was such a long scene, and it was so gory, and the noises that were being dear lord.
The sound
Oh.
effects. Oh my god.
That was
And
the rough part for me.
And it was not CGI. I was reading an article. They like made a fake head
Oh my god.
for her to put on. I
Oh.
mean, it was not CGI. She was pretending to saw off her own
Oh my
head.
god.
And I'm just like, how, what?
Oh my god.
Why? Why would you do
Yeah.
that? Poor Toni Collette.
Oh. Yeah, that
I
was
know.
oh, that was the hardest part I think of the movie for me to get through.
Yeah.
Oh.
I have to say,
Oh, it was just...
when she was banging her head on the attic door, that was a little difficult.
That was bad too.
I mean, just that
Yes.
whole the end of the movie was. I mean, it was scary
Mm-hmm.
in a different way than the sequence we were talking about, but it was very effective. I think all of it.
The other scene that got a huge reaction out of me was when Peter breaks his own nose on the
Oh,
desk.
that was bad. Yes.
And before he does it, he assumes the same position that Charlie was in when she got decapitated.
Yes.
And then breaks his own nose. And that was one where I mean, I didn't scream, but I definitely went, oh, you know.
Yeah.
I just
And,
That
got
and so did
chills.
Sergio. I mean, we both were like, oh no.
Yeah. Oh god.
Oh, this movie is so good. Oh, I
Yes.
just love it. I can't wait. Guys, we haven't even talked about the fact that Ann Dowd was in this movie, who I immediately knew she was evil.
Goddess. She is
I love
so
her.
good at being bad.
The second she came on screen, I was like, well, I know who the villain is. The other thing that grossed me out was one of Annie's miniatures, which I feel like no one's talking about this, and it went kind of fast. But it was the grandmother
Yes. Yes.
breastfeeding the
Yes.
little girl when she was a baby.
Yes.
And I was just like, no.
I was so confused by that one. I was like, what the hell is going on?
And I feel like nobody's talking about it.
No. No. Oh my god.
Yeah, because
Ah.
when the mom is saying, like, oh, she insisted on feeding her, and then the miniatures shows her trying to breastfeed her, I was like, no! That's your granddaughter.
Ah.
Why? There's no milk in there.
Oh my god.
Why?
So, did anything in particular confuse you that after you found everything out, you just thought back and went, yeah, but like, what about, I don't understand, like, who was possessed at what time? And
Mm-hmm. For me, it was kind of like what rules of the game are we playing? because when you do stuff like possession and conjuration and stuff like that, I feel like the rules need to be kind of explained a little clearly, because they're different for every movie you watch and every scenario that you're in. And I was very confused by what the terms were, I guess. Okay, one of the things I was confused by. So, Rachel, you said that Charlie was possessed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't get that in the movie, but I was confused about, like...
Okay, so Charlie was possessed. I can't remember why they didn't put the demon in Peter when he was born.
That, I think, happened because the mom wouldn't let the grandmother near her firstborn.
That's right, they were estranged.
Yes, but
because her brother, yeah.
See, okay, one of the people that came to the movie with me seemed to understand this a little better than I did, even. Because, so they said that this King Payman had to be in a male.
He didn't have to. He preferred a male host.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So he prefers a male host, but Charlie was the only option, because remember, Annie says that her mom wanted Charlie to be a boy.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so Charlie is possessed, and then when Charlie dies, her spirit is like floating around, and her spirit is what goes into Annie, which is what causes her to become possessed. And then the spirit goes into Peter. So Peter at the end is actually possessed by the spirit of Charlie with the demon inside her.
Oh my God.
Not just the spirit of the demon. Does that make sense?
Yes, that answered my question.
Okay.
What the director said was that Charlie was not Charlie since birth. There was never a Charlie.
Oh.
There was a girl,
Okay.
but she was displaced by this demon. So it really was just Payman doing everything the whole time, but it was under the guise of Charlie because he knew that's what would affect the family members. And I kind of was thinking, like, why did they have to do all this stuff? Like, obviously, if the family's fucked from the beginning, and it doesn't matter what, it doesn't matter if this plan works or not, he's gonna find some way to get into Peter. Why did they have to go through all this torture? Well, I was kind of thinking about something they said in The Conjuring where there's like several stages of possession, and one of them is breaking the host down, like so that their spirit is weakened enough that they can enter. So I almost wondered, even though they didn't explain that, if that was part of it, using that death to like...
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like, I read something about how, like I had mentioned, that before Peter breaks his own nose, he takes the posture of Charlie's decapitated body, and that was his body preparing itself for a spiritual takeover. He had to prepare himself. Even though he didn't realize he was doing it, the cult was preparing his body to accept the spirit of Charlie.
Okay.
And, you know, and then they bring up, you know, when Annie's teenage brother killed himself, that his suicide note says that his mother was trying to put people inside of him.
Right.
And obviously that's what it was. They were priming him to be taken over by Paimon, but he committed suicide before they could do it.
Yeah, see, that was one of the things that did confuse me with them talking to Charlie at the end. Because I was like, who is talking to Charlie? Where is Charlie?
Right.
Like, I was very confused by that. So that makes a lot of sense.
The thing that confused me the most, which is really stupid, it's really stupid, but then I read an explanation after I saw the movie, was at the end, when, you know, the music has been kind of subtle and really low-key, but very well done, and then at the end, all of a sudden, there are all of these trumpets blaring.
Yeah.
So I was actually reading an interview with the guy who wrote I really love this movie. I've read like 500 articles about it. But with the guy who wrote the score, with the composer. And he said that Paimon is usually depicted wearing a crown of trumpets.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And so when Charlie takes over Peter's body, thus Paimon takes over Peter's body, he wanted the score to reflect that it had finally taken place by having all of these trumpets blaring, kind of signifying his final arrival on Earth.
See, to me, it felt very like Revelations, because I think they said that Paimon was one of the kings of hell. So to me, it felt very like, all right, this is the end, sort of a thing. Like, here comes the apocalypse, Revelations, sort of a feel. But that makes a lot of sense.
That's a really interesting interpretation. I didn't think about, okay, now what? Now what? You know? That's
right.
I almost wonder, I think it could go both ways. I think it could go, this is like the first sign of the apocalypse. I think it could also go in a way where it's like you never know what evil is walking around right in plain sight. Like, the world doesn't change. Assuming there's been these people who are obviously very adept at helping demons get into human hosts, doing this for like centuries.
Right.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it, I'm wondering like, oh shit, there's a whole universe here where this has happened before. And yeah.
The twist, once I knew what it was, I kind of knew what was going to happen for the rest of the movie, or I had an idea, just because it's the same storyline as Paranormal Activity 3, I think it was, where the mother sold the firstborn son to some demon for money, and that's the whole reason that Katie stole her sister's son in the second movie. Do you guys remember this?
I only saw
the first
one.
movie. It scared me too much to watch the rest.
Yeah. Yeah, so in the second one, Katie, we find out, is like steals her sister's child after the first movie. And yeah, in the third one, you find out that their mom, their grandmother, I think it was, ran a cult where she sold the firstborn son. And so it was a very similar storyline. So I had a feeling that it was going to, kind of go similarly, and it pretty much did.
Yeah, once I figured out what was going on, once I was told what was going on, because there's no way I would have guessed, it felt very similar to Rosemary's Baby. I thought it was a giant nod to that sort of, no matter what you do, you're being primed to be this certain person, or to play this role. And I thought about the ends, just in feeling being very similar. I loved that. It was like a return to former types of horror movies.
Yeah.
I loved, once I figured out the twist, I after we got out of the movie, I was sort of reflecting on other things that had happened in the movie, and they started making more sense. Like, earlier in the movie, when we find out that once upon a time, Annie, when she was sleepwalking, she doused her kids in paint thinner to light them on fire. There's also another scene where she has a dream about how she wanted to have an abortion with Peter.
Oh, about
but
how
her mom wouldn't let her. And she says, I wasn't trying to kill you. I was trying to protect you. And so I think once I knew the twist, I realized that deep down in her subconscious, she knew something evil was happening. Because on the surface, she thought, I'm just crazy like the rest of my family. My brother killed himself. He was crazy. My mom was crazy. I must be crazy too. But in her subconscious, she knew that something was wrong.
Yeah.
She knew that as long as her kids were alive, there was a threat. And so I liked that. That's what I meant before when I said the twist makes sense with the rest of the movie. Once you go back and think about the rest of the movie, it's like, oh my god, this twist actually pays off. It makes the rest of the movie make a lot more sense.
I didn't even think about that. There's still so many parts that probably I haven't realized now tie in to the ending. What I did realize immediately, though, was that the accident was scripted, which I thought was really interesting.
Oh, Charlie's accident?
Well, yeah, it wasn't an accident. When they drove by the pole had the symbol on it. So it was going to happen no matter what. They were all fucked.
I did not realize that. I did not know that at all. How did I miss that? Oh,
that's what I mean. That's why I'm saying that we want to we're going to go see it again when we come back from vacation, because I feel like there's so much that I missed.
Yeah. So, what do you guys think about the depiction of Satanism in the film? How do you think it's using our lingering fears from the satanic panic in the 80s to manipulate us?
I think it did a really good job of using the lingering fears of not even just the satanic panic, but just the fear of Satan and demons in this country. I mean, obviously we were founded as a Puritan nation, so even people who aren't Christian, like me, still have this fear of like demons being out there just because it's culturally such a big thing. And I think the idea of people out there corrupting your children has always been a huge fear of parents, I guess, and as a parent, it and so I think that this movie did a really, 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 really good job of preying on those fears. And even just preying on the fears of Annie knowing that something was wrong, but she didn't know what. Because obviously we don't find out about the demon until like the end of the movie. But she knew something was going on. She knew something was, like I said, her subconscious was telling her something was wrong with her kids. I think it did a good job of preying on that fear that not just all parents have, but a lot of people have about their family members being harmed.
Yeah. I had to read some stuff about this, like some interviews with the director, because normally I didn't leave the movie with this feeling, but normally when I see, oh, it was witches in the horror movie plot, I go, oh, fuck, are we over this yet? Like, but it was done in a very intelligent way, in a very, like, meta, it knows what it's doing way. So, I left it loving that even more.
I'm gonna be honest, I didn't even really think about the Satanism aspects of the movie until I read the question. I don't know why. I guess I think I'm getting to a point where I kind of expect it in movies at this point. A lot of movies are referencing some sort of demon. So I don't know. It's kind of a hard question for me to answer because I didn't think about it. If I remember correctly, didn't this have a lot to do with Judaism? Wasn't King Payman like...
He is from the Old Testament.
Okay. So I guess for me, like, I got more of like religious, I don't know, not much like Satanism. I don't know. That might have been just something that kind of like went over my head. Because Satanism to me is not like demons and stuff, because Satanism as a religion isn't really that. So maybe that's why it's just like different definitions for me.
Yeah.
But,
well, yeah, and that was my point, is that they are absolutely different, but I guess you were saying that you think about it as like, this wasn't even touching on that because you didn't even associate those things.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I was really think of it that way, I guess.
This is the picture of the stock occultist / Satanist / witch, because let's just put those things together and pretend like they're the same. For me, at first I was thinking that, and I was like, especially with, this is kind of going off on a tangent, but with, in the beginning of the movie, them talking about the grandmother having DID, but now that I know the end, I'm almost wondering if, like, she didn't. she
I don't think she did.
She was legitimately
I don't think she did.
communicating with, so I was like, whoa, you guys gotta be careful here, like, thinking about the way that they're commenting on mental health and, like, depicting a grandmother as evil and, like, oh, she was a terrible person, and, you know, but
well,
no.
that scared me. That scared me too. When the second they mentioned DID, I was like, oh no, please don't be bad.
Exactly. I was like, please don't
make me hate you.
But you know what? And also it was like, whoa, of course she would think it was that. Yeah. But it wasn't at all.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think the grandma was happy to let people think that's what was wrong.
Oh, of course. She was a manipulative bitch.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, she was an evil person.
Yeah.
So, what was the most important theme in this film for you?
Well, I know for me, it was like mental illness and grief. I feel like they can kind of just be tied together. I think a lot of it is like fear of mental illness. Because I felt like the mother throughout the whole movie, like you said earlier, she was just terrified that because her brother was schizophrenic, right? And then her mom had DID. What her beliefs about her family is that her mother had DID and her brother was schizophrenic. And I don't know much about DID, but schizophrenia tends to run in families. So I think for her, like, one of her biggest problems was this just lingering fear that she was gonna, you know, randomly develop one of these mental illnesses at some point in her life. And also, like, not knowing how to manage grief at all either. To me, it was clear in the movie that no one knew how to manage any form of mental illness, never knew how to treat it, how to talk about it, how to manage it whatsoever. And grief included. I mean, no one ever talked about anything. So to me, like, that was the most important theme throughout the movie.
Yeah. Going off that, mine was grief and dealing with grief, but I thought that there were ways of dealing with grief depicted in this film that should be normalized that are not. You know, the mom is being very open about how horrific this experience has been, and she's, in her own way, expressing it through her art. And people are calling her, or not calling her, but treating her as if she's hysteric, as if she's insane, as if she's imagining things, but she's actually, in her best way, trying to constructively deal with this grief. I liked the way they depicted, you know, her, you know, making the miniature of the accident scene. I didn't find that strange at all. I thought, what is the most horrible thing about her daughter's death? I mean, she didn't slip away in her sleep, you know? Like, she's reliving those details in her mind over and over again. And the art gallery keeps calling her, wanting some dumbass diorama of a concert hall. And she's, like, making these miniatures of her inner world, and it's fucking awesome. I loved that part of the movie. That is what, for me, made this movie stand out, is the way it dealt with those topics so, like, boldly and so unashamedly.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with you guys. I mean, for me, the biggest theme of the movie was not even necessarily Annie fearing that she would turn out to be, you know, crazy, in quotes, like her mother and her brother, but just the general fear that people have of turning out like your family, even if your family isn't necessarily crazy, quote unquote crazy, but just this general sense of you don't want to be like your parents. Nobody wants to end up like their parents, especially if, like Annie, you didn't get along with your parent. I don't think they really talk about the dad, do they? Like Annie's father?
No. He's just kind of there, you know? He's kind of like the normalcy check, almost.
Annie's father.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about Peter's father. Seemed like...
No, not the husband. No, Annie's father.
Okay.
I think they don't even mention him.
No.
I don't think
they do.
But especially, I think there's this fear of, for whatever reason, this cultural fear from women of turning out just like your mother. And isn't that everybody's biggest fear of, oh my god, I'm turning into my mother?
Yeah.
And so I thought that this did a good job of kind of playing with that theme. Also, I think it did a good job with, like you guys were saying, dealing with grief and the different kinds of grief, because, you know, after the grandmother dies, I mean, Annie even asks, you know, am I supposed to feel sad?
Yeah.
And I liked that it kind of dealt with that, because I personally have had 3 shitty grandparents who are all dead. And I mean, when they died, it was kind of like, okay, well, I guess that's it. I mean, there was no, like, mourning. There was no grief. But you feel weird because you feel like you should be sad. One of your family members has just died. And so then you start to feel like, well, is there something wrong with me? I'm not upset. So I thought that was interesting that they raised that point, even though they just kind of raised it briefly.
Yeah. Even like the opposite of extreme grief.
Yeah, that you just, I mean, that was her mother that died, and that in itself is sad, that her mother died and she was just like, oh, okay, well, I guess it's upsetting, but not really mourning her mother. And then it turns out for good reason, because obviously her mom was
God,
not a great person.
No. No.
Well, you know, she fell in with Ann Dowd, so obviously things went wrong.
Guys, Ann Dowd is the hero of this movie, as she is of everything she touches.
There's one funny spot in that movie, and it is when I think it, like, the husband looks at the piece of paper and he's like, what language is this even in? That was the greatest. I think they did it twice. They called back to it once. Like, you just know that you don't read that piece of paper. Like, you just...
Yeah.
I know. And speaking of Ann Dowd, I thought, and the seance, I thought the acting in that scene with Ann Dowd and Toni Collette, the seance scene, oh my god, you want to talk about just like a master class in acting. Yeah. I just love that Ann Dowd is having this like Ann Dowd renaissance. I don't know what's going on. But she's just great in everything. She was on The Leftovers. She was great. Obviously, Handmaid's Tale, she won an Emmy. Well deserved. She's amazing in that. And then this. And she was in this really good movie a few years ago called Compliance. That is one of the most horrifying and uncomfortable movie viewing experiences I've ever had. So I recommend it. I think it's on Netflix.
I know I've seen her before, but to me, she's Aunt Lydia. And, like, when I saw her in the car window, I just leaned over to Paul and I was like, that's Aunt Lydia!
I'm telling you, the second she showed up, I was like, damn, it's all gonna go down. Like Miranda said, it is gonna go downhill from here.
For a second, I had a childlike moment where I was like, maybe she's gonna play a nice person in this. No. Nope. This is a horror movie.
Yeah, no, but this movie she was great in this movie. And like I said, that scene of her and Toni Collette was just, ugh.
So I was reading an article, and I read that some viewers see this movie as a metaphorical story about a woman who, after the loss of her mother and daughter, murders her husband and finally kills herself. Do you buy a metaphorical reading of the film? Or do you think that its major plot points are best taken as literal? I have a pretty definite answer to this, but...
Okay, well, I felt like the very last scene of the movie, I felt like it left it a little open-ended, just simply because of Peter's facial expression. I think the fact that he looked so confused could encourage you to lean either way. I almost think, because I had a long conversation with my friends after this, and we all had, like, differing opinions, I think some of us were like, so, did any of this actually happen? Like, is he just confused by everything he just saw, and King Payman is not in him, and he's just like, what the fuck? Or is King Payman in him, and he's just confused because he's in a human body? But I don't know, I felt like the facial expression for Peter could make it go either way. I didn't read it as the way that you described it, Nikki. I didn't see it that way, but yeah, I could see people questioning everything that happened in the movie or taking it literally. I don't know which way I lean. I almost felt like it was intentionally supposed to be like that.
I think that it should be taken literally. I think at the end, after Peter throws himself out the attic window, and you see that little light dissolve into his body, I think that was pretty clearly Charlie's spirit entering his body. I think the way I read the expression of confusion at the end is Charlie, because Peter's gone at that point. I mean, Charlie / Paimon has completely taken over his body. And so I think that Charlie is confused about what has been happening. Her spirit is confused about what has been happening. And I think that that's the look of confusion is, oh my god, I'm alive again, but where am I? What's happening? And I think that Joan, I think that was Ann Dowd's character's name, is about to, right when it's ending, is going to kind of let Charlie know what's been going on, with Paimon and all that kind. I guess you could say Charlie, but like you said, there really was no Charlie. So Paimon know what's been happening. So I definitely took it as 100% literal.
Yeah. So did I. I think, it was pretty clearly literal. I can see where someone might come up with that interpretation, but there are some, discrepancies there where, if this was a story about a mother, why do we cut from following her most closely in the movie to following Peter at the end, and it's purely his perspective? That's my big question about that. I think there are elements of metaphor in the film that, like we were talking about, address real life issues. That always happens in horror films, but I don't think they're where these people are saying they are. I loved the dollhouse thing, the whole fact that you're puppets in a factory and you're being manipulated by this unseen hand. Obviously, that's something that works, and the thought, you know, fears about turning into your parents, fears about mental illness and ways we deal with grief and stuff. That's all, like, I think pretty legitimate. As far as plot-wise, as far as, like, what really happened in this world, I think it's all as it plays out.
Well, and then I think that, you know, there's that scene of, you know, there's quite a few scenes where, like, they're at the grandmother's funeral and that man smiles at Charlie. And there's all these new faces that Annie says she doesn't know. And when Charlie comes out of her school and there's a woman waving at her from across the street, I mean, clearly those are all the cult members that are kind of invisibly pulling these strings. Like you said, the whole puppet theme that they bring up, you know, kind of invisibly pulling these strings to manipulate this family to get to the point that they need to be in order for Paimon to take over Peter's body.
Yeah, I can't wait for a second viewing of this film. I think that will drive that home even more clearly. I'm just going to be smiling the whole time.
I think so too, and I think that if you had the ability to pause the movie, you know, all those naked people in the treehouse at the end of the movie, I think you would see those people that you saw earlier, the people from the funeral and the lady from across the street. I definitely bought it, that it was supposed to be 100% literal.
Was the crown made of human skin?
I think it was.
That had to be explained to me. In my mind, for some reason, I saw a construction paper crown. And I just took it.
That's what I saw, too.
Yeah, I think it was supposed to be made of human skin.
That's news to me.
A construction paper crown.
Yeah.
No wonder he wanted a human body. I mean, don't we all want one? Okay, I just needed that confirmed because I was talking to Paul, like, really casually about it afterwards, and I was like, oh yeah, and that construction paper crown. He's like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, that crown was made of human skin.
No, I think it was supposed to be a human skin, but I don't know if they say, like, where it came from.
Oh, did anyone notice the figure at the end in the treehouse? The effigy they had?
Mm-mm.
The head on it was Charlie's.
Oh, I did notice that.
Oh, yes, I did.
Yeah.
Yes.
That was fucked up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I did. I was just like, oh, no, what's happening? Why?
I see, and I didn't get why everyone had to lose their heads.
I read another article, guys. An interview with the director where he said that there's definitely a reason that everybody had to lose their head, but that he would rather not say because he thinks it's more fun or more interesting if it's a mystery. He feels like not everything should be explained, which I do agree with.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I could be wrong. I mean, clearly he knows more than I do, but it feels kind of a minor thing to just be like, oh, figure it out yourself. Like,
he says, okay, here we go. So one of the questions, so this is like a question and answer about some things in Hereditary. So, are the decapitations part of Paimon-related lore? And he says, no. I think it would be disingenuous for me to give any sort of intellectual answer. I feel like there are a lot of really good reasons, and I like them all, but uttering them kind of robs them of something. But I do like all the things that they might provoke in somebody. And then Toni Collette, her theory is, we're so attached to our bodies, we're so attached to the brain and the mind. They're like the control center. And once you lose that metaphorically, you become nothing, and therefore you're able to give yourself over to this greater force. So I think that's interesting. I think that's an interesting explanation.
That was my guess.
Yeah.
Like something about losing, God,
like losing your mind.
I can't remember. There's something.
Yeah.
There's some sort of like theory or belief about us being inherently tied to our bodies and that we're not souls. Just that once our brain is gone, we're gone. And Yeah, there's something about that. Where it's like, and also, it kind of calls back to the doll thing for me. Like, that we're just, like, parts that can be disassembled and reassembled. Because then the head winds up, you know, used as its own little miniature, like in the treehouse. Ugh. God, the more I think about this.
I loved it. I can't wait to see it again.
Yeah, me too. So if you have any theories that we didn't discuss, you can email them to us. We're at qotdpodcast@gmail.com. If you had any questions you wanted to ask or things you wanted to weigh in on, you could also do that there, and we might address them at the beginning of the next episode.
Or Facebook, too.
Yeah.
If
Or
you want to
Facebook.
make a Facebook post and everyone can kind of interact on it, that would be cool, too.
And if you haven't seen Hereditary, A, why are you listening to this? And B, get your act together, go see it, it's great.
Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter at QOTD Podcast, on Facebook at facebook.com/QOTD Podcast, Tumblr at queensofthedamnpodcast.tumblr.com, and YouTube at Queens of the Damn Podcast.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe on iTunes, and subscribe to us on Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and TuneIn Radio. You can also follow us on our blog, queensofthedamnpodcast.wordpress.com, to find bonus content and extra information on our episodes.
If you would like to donate to our show, you can find us at patreon.com/QOTD podcast, where you can receive special perks as a listener for becoming a monthly patron. If you would like to make a one-time donation, you can send it to qotdpodcast@gmail.com on PayPal. Donations are greatly appreciated. They improve the quality of the show and go towards the production of future merch along with a new logo.
We'll see you next week. The first time she mentioned a seance, I turned to my friend Jillian. She was the one that cried during the movie. I turned to her and I was like, I'm sorry. And she was like, what? And I was like, I'm sorry. I knew from that moment it was just gonna go downhill.
As soon as
the
I
second they
swear to
mention a
God.
seance, it's just gonna get bad.